Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the latest episode of Max Rants, Rambles about whatever the flippy frick I feel like talking about this week. I've been thinking, I did a video not too long ago about Skate 4 or Skate Reboot, whatever the flip you want to call it. In the same vein, I think today I want to talk about Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grind Radio, whichever you prefer to call it, the original Dreamcast franchise that I ended up kind of associating with Xbox because of Jet Set Radio Future, which was a launch title, or at least a pack-in title for the original Xbox. I'm not sure if it was a launch title. Maybe they just put it in there later. But yeah, a lot of people ended up playing Jet Set Radio Future on Xbox because it was a pack-in title. So, popular game there too. I would say a lot of people love Jet Set Radio because of the soundtrack, obviously, and it has a very strong aesthetic. It also had a very strong, stylized look, obviously the cell shading, but also the character design. And so, it's been about a year since Sega kind of has started teasing their Jet Set Radio remaster, remake. I think it's a remake, full-on reboot. There is some gameplay out there of it. I don't think the gameplay necessarily looks bad, but I do have some concerns about maybe the art style, and hopefully the music in the game is good. I think that's an easy one to get right. And then we can also talk about some of the other spiritual successors for the genre. I should have looked them up before, but I believe one of them is called Hyper Grind. You basically, if you go and look at the music released by Hideki Naganuma, I believe his name is, the guy who did the original soundtracks for those games. He has done a ton of work on indie games throughout the years that have all been inspired by this. I know recently Sega has started doing more cross promos with Jet Set Radio as a brand, kind of obviously getting back to it. They know it's a very deeply well-loved brand as far as nostalgia and street culture, fashion, and that's something I've talked about a little bit with the Skate remake and Tony Hawk remake, is that in the early 2000s, a lot of people are gravitating towards that style. And the game just kind of embodied that youthful energy of the early 2000s of this counterculture, graffiti, you know what I mean? And, as far as games made in Japan go, graffiti is probably about one of the more dangerous things they'll ever depict. They even have warnings in the game, please don't do graffiti. It's, it's art, but, please don't deface public property, which kind of goes against one of the main things about graffiti is that it's diegetic art you find in the real world done by people who don't really care about rules, you know what I mean? That's kind of the spirit of the game. So it's always been at odds, I think, with the corporate structure of Sega being a Japanese company, but still wanting that fun establishment feel of games like that. So yeah. So it's been about a year. They announced, and you can go and look at the gameplay video of the reveal of the new Jet Set Radio game. It does look like it's still kind of staying true to the original series, grinding and skating everywhere. I do think that the physics look more, quote unquote realistic. It looks like people are jumping off buildings and stuff, and there's still going to be big air. But one of the interesting things about the original Jet Set Radio and Jet Grind is the floaty, very strange physics. It's got odd physics. It gives it a very unique feel compared to something like Tony Hawk or other skating games of the era. And it's a little bit of a janky game. It's hard to go back to it now, I think, especially because we have games like Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. It's one of the hardest. I don't know why that's such a hard name to me to say, but I have been playing that recently. I got it on sale. One of the first games I bought on my Xbox in forever, but it is a great game. And I would say, in terms of spiritual successors, Bomb Rush Cyberfunk is basically what I've always wanted. It has a great soundtrack that's filled with a lot of, smaller artists that are passionate about that kind of sound. And, they have different, it's just well executed. It also feels and looks like Jet Grind Radio and, Jet Set Radio Future. It feels like those games but also goes back and adds new mechanics, and it makes things like the graffiti minigame more fun. And it also makes things like the physics, it retains some of that floatiness, but it feels better to play. You know, it's not as janky. But yeah, I love Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. I definitely recommend that game if you have the opportunity to play it. That's one, it's not that expensive either. So that's also kind of my worry about the Jet Grind. I keep calling it Jet Grind. Jet Set Radio Remake is that I don't want them to do what they did with Skate. I don't want it to be a live service game that is designed to sell skins. I don't want it to be, you know, I'm worried about it. I don't think Sega would do that, but there is that worry because I guess we're just in that era, right? So I do worry. I hope that it is a complete package. It is a single player game that you can just buy and own. And I don't know, Sega's in an interesting spot as a developer right now because they do some things right. I think Yakuza is an example of a series that they're getting right like all the time. And then you look at Sonic, and Sonic has kind of been up and down for the last couple of years. I think they're on the upswing now after, what was it, Sonic Frontiers. A lot of people seem to like it. But I do think Sonic is an example of like, and I've recently learned that Sonic is mostly a Western thing. It's not as popular in Japan. So those are games that are ostensibly made for America and the Western market. So that is probably going to be the target of the Jet Grind, or it's the same game. You know what I'm talking about. Jet Set Radio, Jet Grind Radio, they're all the same game. And I grew up calling it Jet Grind Radio because I think that was the Dreamcast name in America. Doesn't matter. You know what I'm talking about. Those games, they hold a special place in people's hearts. They have a very specific aesthetic, a style, and the more realistic style in the new one, I don't know if it exactly captures the feeling. Like, if you go and look at art, like I have like all of the original games of this series, and all of the art is so unique and very jagged and edgy and stylized. And you know, there were other games of that era like Cell Damage and other cell shaded games that had this really awesome look, but it's just something that's kind of been lost, and I was hoping that they would kind of hopefully bring that style forward. In the actual game itself, it does have a cell shaded look to it. I've looked at some of the gameplay, and it does still have, but it's a much more realistic look, I think. So I don't know if I hate it, but it's definitely a different vibe, I think. Still trying to carry some of that energy forward. So the character designs are okay, but I think it might be a mistake to make it more realistic. You know what I mean? The character designs are they're wearing these crazy clothes, but they still look like people at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's one of my concerns is just the art style and the general tone and vibe of the game. I hope they nail it. It's another case where I'm such a big fan of the original games that I'm still willing to admit that they had faults. Like the Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future had very janky gameplay. So they weren't perfect games, but I do think the important thing to nail, other than getting a better gameplay loop, is that vibe, is the color palette of the world, the design of the characters, the feel, like the story. What is the story? Like, you know, the story of the original game is both about gangs and what graffiti is, as well as you're going against the cops, you're going against corporations. So, and it's interesting because, you know, that's kind of the same story that they've gone with in the Skate games. But I really criticize the Skate 4, Skate reboot, whatever you want to call it. The modern Skate live service game has a very like anti-capitalism bad guy, but EA is literally the big kind of company that they're trying to make fun of. So it just doesn't really work, I guess, or it's like you just can tell that the satire that they're going for is a little hollow because they're not really allowed to go whole hog on the commentary that they should be able to make in that game, especially a game that's a skating culture game that's counterculture and has always been at odds with corporate kind of, you know, I don't know. I guess that's just where I'm at. Is I'm worried about Jet Set Radio. I'm worried about Jet Set Radio Remake because I love the game so dearly and what it represents, the music, the soundtrack. I still listen to it all the time. I listen to tons of artists, and I don't know. it's just an important thing to a lot of people. So them finally going back to it after what, like 25 years, 20 years, and I think we have a right to be a little worried about it, with Sega being kind of like a 50-50 shot at like a game being awesome or just kind of not. And not even that it's going to be bad, but it could be so mediocre that we just kind of forget they even did it. Because I think there have been times in the past where we finally get a new game in a series and it is so mid that nobody even remembers it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's basically where I'm at, is that, you know, I don't think Sega is as bad as like EA per se. So I think I have more faith in them that they can get this right. But I do think, you know, if you go and look at the comparisons between the character designs in the original and the new character designs, that alone is enough for me to be like, I'm not sure this is for me. And that's okay. Maybe it will find a new audience, and in 20 years, people will be reminiscing about that game. So it doesn't necessarily have to be made for me, but it does feel like it's made for me when they're resurrecting this very nostalgic game that means a lot to people. So, yeah. Yeah, it's just, we're just in this era of remaking everything, and, you know, they're mining all the stuff for nostalgia that I grew up with. So in 10 years, when they get tired of that, they'll move on to the nostalgia for people younger than me. So, but right now that we're in the era of remaking everything from when I was 10 years old. Yeah, I don't know, man. Anyway, that's pretty much my thoughts. I think I articulated well enough. Like I said, I want them to succeed. I hope they find success, but I'm going to be waiting on more gameplay footage, more music. I want to know who's making the music for this game. So there's things I need to know before I can be like, yes, I'm excited for a new Jet Set Radio. So yeah, chat, tell me in the comments, what do you think about the new Jet Set Radio? Are you optimistic? Are you worried? What are you looking forward to from it? Or are you like, they should stop making these games and just make something new, which is totally valid as well. And also I'll put a quick shout out here to all of the I think it's called Hover Grind, which also has a Hideki Naganuma song, which is like a first person like air grinding game. Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, I think it was Roller Derby or something, some game. Roller Arena had a crossover with Jet Set Radio. There's a bunch of games like Jet Set Radio that you can play right now that are also cheap and great and have amazing soundtracks. So even if Jet Set Radio Remake is crappy, we have like a dozen other substitutes that are as good as a modern day remake. So yeah, at the end of the day, if you're worried about that game, just pretend it doesn't exist and go play Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. I highly recommend. All right,